So in the beginning of chapter Vav, we're now in Perek Daled, Chelik Daled Perek Vav, part 4, chapter 6. In the beginning of the chapter, the Ramchal, this is what we did last week. We started it off. The Ramchal talks about how HaKadosh Baruch Hu created good and evil, and he gave place for, or let me say this more clearly. In order for Hashem to facilitate the powers of evil, he had to give them place, or let me say that better, give them time. He had to give them a certain time of the day. He had to give them some time of the day. He had to give them a certain time of the day where they had some degree of shlita, some degree of dominion, their domain, such that the concept of acts of evil that draw and bring about more of those the powers of evil, they would have some place where they can be expanded from or shrunken back. And he described the nighttime, to be the time where the kochos of tumen of evil, that is their domain. And he pointed out, very interestingly, that already in the middle of the night, the halachic middle of the night, not midnight, but the middle point between the beginning and the end of the night, at that point is already the turning point where the powers of evil begin to be weakened and things start moving in the direction of the good, in the direction of light. And that is an opportune time. That is a time of divine mercy when Hashem is easily appeased. And that is why that time is the time for Tikkun Chatzos, the time, a special time for davening. We spoke about that last week. Okay, let's continue. Oh, yes, and he also described to us the fact that this tumah, these powers of impurity, they reside on us, and they have an effect on us during the nighttime, and specifically when we're sleeping, because to a certain degree, our neshama leaves our body. There's a disconnect between the neshama and the body when one is asleep, and that small degree to which the neshama leaves the body is that 1/60th of death, which Chazal referred to in the Gemara in Brachos, which he references, and the tumah, Netilas Yadayim, washing your hands in the morning, is because of that little bit of tumah, that residual impurity that's left on the fingertips when the neshama returns and when the impurity of night leaves come morning. That's how the Ramchal described it. Okay, let's continue now. We are now in paragraph Gimel, number 3 of chapter 6. The divine wisdom has prepared for man that which he does in the that work that he does in the morning. This romain, he prepared a procedure for man. In which he will rise up from what the scenario to which he has sunk into during the night. The tahir to purify himself from that which he has become impure. And likewise, the entire world is rises up from that lower state. And it is illuminated from the darkness to which it was darkened. All of this concept of rising up, of elevating ourselves, pulling ourselves up out of the darkness and impurity that we've kind of settled and sunken down into over the course of the night, we rise ourselves up through the halachos of the morning. The inyan zeh kulo nichlal b'takanos haniskanos l'zman hakima. These are all included in the takanos, in the decrees the enactments of the morning of the wake-up time, menapaulos and menadiburim, from the actions and the utterances, the speaking, as we will explain the Shamsak. Okay, so that's a general backdrop for all the different practices that we do in the early morning, that they're part of our spiritual wake-up, that they get us ready for the day and they rise us up from that lower level, spiritual level that we naturally settle down to and sink down to over the course of the night. The practices of the morning, they rise us up from that lower state to a higher state of an illumination of Hashem. Hine, paragraph Dalet 4. Hine hapoal harishon hutar sayadayim. The first action is purifying the hands. Hine heim shenitma v'shar leim rachara. Those are the ones that have become impure and that the impure spirit has settled on them. For that reason, we have to kind of chase it away and we have to purify them. Hashem has said, he has decreed that it should be removed through proper washing, as our sages have taught us. The result being that the entire body of man is purified through this. Just as the entire body became impurified through that ruach ra, that evil spirit that settled upon it. So the washing, the netilas yadayim really acts as a vehicle for a certain degree of purification of the entire body. That's what he's teaching us. And there is in this matter a tikkun, a perfection for the entire creation. Yitahir mitumas alayla, to be purified from the impurity of night, v'lotzeis, and to exit, to leave michesh chasa, from its darkness. V'hinei, behold, chibru laze gamkin nakos ha'adam as gufo v'hi panoso. Excuse me, well, let's break that up into two sentences. Firstly, he says, a fascinating point, that when we all do this, when we do netilas yadayim, it's not only purifying our hands, it's purifying our entire bodies. It's not only purifying our entire bodies, but it's having an effect on the entire world. That's really fascinating. V'yesh be'inyan has a gamkin tikkun the kol abriya kulo, the entire creation. To purify from the impurity of the night and to exit from its darkness. V'hinei, behold, chibru laze gamkin nakus ha'adam as gufo v'hi fanoso. They have attached to this also the concept of man cleaning out his body and emptying it out. Resulting in a purification and a preparation for coming close to Hashem, his creator. So I assume what he means by that is going to the bathroom, is that the most common natural cycle is that first thing in the morning is usually when a person has the need to use the bathroom and to clean out the body. That's all part of this process of getting ready for the day, of rising up from that lower state that we experience during the night and preparing ourselves for a day of service of Hashem and closeness to Hashem. That's all part of it. Okay, paragraph Hey, number 5. However, after this, two actions occur after this. They are both included in the 613 mitzvahs, and they are connected, associated with prayer. With the completion of the daily service. Tzitzis v'Tefilin. Those two mitzvahs are Tzitzis and Tefilin. I'll begin by explaining each of their specifics. And then afterwards, I'll explain their levels in regards to the daily process, as we've explained. Okay, so the Ramchal now is going to take a break from the big picture of this parak, which is the process of the day and the process of the morning, to be precise in terms of where we're at this stage of the chapter. He's going to digress a little bit to zero in on the idea of tzitzis and the idea of tefillin and how that fits into this big picture of the spiritual realm that he is describing to us. In and out tzitzisu. So first off is tzitzis. What's the concept of tzitzis? Ki hine ratz ha'adon baruch hu shehoyu Yisrael misukanim b'chol b'chinuseim b'inyanei kedusha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem wanted that the Jewish people should be perfected in all dimensions, all aspects, in matters of kedusha, matters of sanctity. Va'al kain, and therefore, nosan lehem mitzvos l'kol zmanehem k'fi kol mikrehem. Hashem has given us mitzvos for all times and all instances. So that's an important general statement about mitzvos, which we might have heard in other places, but now we're seeing it right here in the Ramchal. And that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, a person might think to himself, oh my gosh, so many mitzvahs, they just never stop. Well, that's intentional.
Press that button.
That's very much the purpose that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants the Jew to have every time and every instance, every action, every part of life to have in it opportunities for kedusha, for holiness and for sanctity. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us so many mitzvahs to accompany us at all the different times of the day and so many different parts of our day. We should be perfected to each and every one of them. A part of man, a part of the human experience is clothing, the clothing that we wear. In order that our clothing should also have an element of sanctity, he commanded us to place upon them tzitzis. Then even our clothing has an element of sanctity to it. So that is the first point about tzitzis. The tzitzis is adding an element of kedusha to our clothing. There is a deeper matter that is also included in this mitzvah. Okay, that is included in this mitzvah. That is that the person should bear a sign to his God that he is his servant. He is a servant to his master. A uniform, if you will. It's the Jewish uniform. That is a degree of accepting Hashem's divine yoke and subjecting himself to Hashem. V'hinei nitan la'adam liyos misakein as kol habriya kamavoar b'chilek rishon. Man's job, it has been given over to man to perfect the entire creation. That is what we discussed all the way in the very beginning of the Sefer. So what does that mean? That means ultimately that man's job in this world, man's purpose, is to serve his creator and do Hashem's holy work. Shehu ha'amid habriya asher bara. That is what holds up creation that was created. On the way that is desired by Hashem. V'ulam ze yotze mima'aseh ha'adam u'pu'ulosav. This results from man's actions and deeds, that he does in accordance to the Torah and the mitzvahs. However, this entire job, which is man's purpose in the world, which is to perfect the world through Torah and mitzvahs, stands on one foundation. That man is the servant of the Creator, may he be blessed. That it has been given over to him, this matter of perfecting creation, and it has been placed in his domain. When he recognizes that, that's when he is successful. And his actions yield these results. The totality of this reality, this burden that man bears, this job, this task which we are tasked with, that is what we mean when we say that the yoke of heaven or the yoke of God, that is just like the yoke of a master places over his servant. This is strengthened through certain specific ideas which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has made dependent on it. And amongst those different aspects which identify the Jew as a servant of Hashem, one of those components is the Tzitzis, which acts as a sign, as a symbol. I like the word as a uniform, that to man's role, ultimately it's mankind's purpose, which is being fulfilled through the Jewish people, that is through the tzitzis that we wear. Va'amnam, indeed, milvad yosadavar hazeh mitzvah tmidis, aside from the fact that this is a constant mitzvah, also Chazal have added a component that links it to tefillah. So this is a really interesting thing, which is a little bit confusing about tzitzis, honestly. Like, why do we wear the talis specifically when we daven? Seemingly, tzitzis is just one of the 613 mitzvahs. You wear a four-cornered. If you want to wear a four-cornered garment, you have to put tzitzis on those four corners. So what does it have to do with tefillah? Why is there specifically a concept of a talis when we daven? A talis is just a big tzitzis. It's just a four-cornered garment. So what exactly is the correlation? So this comes from Chazal. Also, Chazal, our sages, have made this a part of prayer. That we should wrap ourselves in a talis to pray with a talis. What's the pshat? What's the reason? It's exactly this. It's the tikkun of Kabbalah's ol. It's the concept of accepting Hashem's heavenly yoke, as we've mentioned. That through that, we grab hold of Hashem's work. The perfection of the world, as we've mentioned. So that's fascinating. So says the Ramchal, this deeper concept of the tzitzis, that it's our uniform, it's how we identify ourselves as Hashem's servants, that concept is very deeply related to tefillah, to davening. Because when we daven to Hashem, ultimately, as we mentioned before, what we're doing is we're recognizing through our speech and through turning to Hashem to provide us for our needs, that we are completely dependent on Him, and that we accept that yoke upon ourselves. The Shema being perhaps the most the apex of that experience, of that avoda. And indeed, that's one of the most critical points to be wearing your talis. Okay, let's continue with paragraph Zayin, number 7. Ach inyan hatfilin hu yoser golda min tzitzis harbe. However, the concept of tefillin is much greater than that of tzitzis. V'hu kinasan habo yisbarach liyisrael sheyiyu mamshichan aleim hemshech mamish mikdushaso yisborech yis'atruva. That through the tefillin, this is something that Hashem has given to the Jewish people, that through this, we should draw down Hashem's very own Kedusha and be crowned with it. Ba'ofen shekol b'chinosehem hanafshiyos ve'hagufios yisyachsu tachas ha'or hagadol hazeh v'yisuknu bo tikun gadol. In such a way that all the different parts of the nefesh and the goof, even the goof, the body and soul of man, should be connected and related under the great light of this tikkun, of Hashem, through this tikkun of the tefillin. Okay, I'm hoping he's going to explain this in more detail. So this is what the pasuk says. All the nations of the land will see that the name of God is called upon you. This has been made dependent on this mitzvah tefillin, in all of its halachos and its details. Okay, so let's pause there for a second. So, regarding the tefillin, he's explaining that the general concept of tefillin is that it's a tool through which Hashem has given us the ability to draw down Hashem's kedusha and to crown ourselves with it in a way that connects all the different parts of our body and soul to the awesome light of Hashem. Amazing. Va'amna. Indeed, shnei eivarim rashiyim nimtza'im ba'adam. There are two primary limbs that exist in man. Ubehem hanasham miskaberes tigberes gadol. And in these two organs of the body, the soul is the most strongly present. V'heim, anyone want to guess before I say it? Hamoach v'halev. You got it. The brain and the heart. Hashem caused it that his divine light should be drawn down to the mind, to the brain, through the tefillin shel rosh. And that perfects and corrects, if you will, the mind, the brain, and the neshama that resides in it. Then it goes to the heart through the tefillin, which goes on the arm, which is directly against the heart. And then it is also perfected and corrected in that way. And it's through this combination of mind and heart that flow of kedusha that comes down through the tefillin, which connects man to God, connects his entire body and his entire soul. Va'amnam prate inyanim shonim nimtzaim b'tanai hamitzvah b'kol chalkeihem kulam. Indeed, there are different aspects that exist in all the intricate conditions and details and different parts of this mitzvah of tefillin. Things that are needed for the completion of this picture of this mitzvah in all of its ways. According to the divisions of man. So that's interesting. It sounds like he's not getting into not going to get into all these little details about why the tefillin have to be square and why they have to have 4 parashas and why the tefillin shel rosh is 4 compartments. And the shel yad is 1 big compartment and why they need to have straps and why they need to be black, etc., etc., etc. All of these details have significance. But what I find fascinating is that even though the Ramchal is not getting into the details, but he has told us the way he understands the nature of each of these details. And to me, this is fascinating because he says that they are all inyanim mitztarchim lahashlomas hatikun hanirtze b'chol chalakav k'fi machlakos b'chinosav shel ha'odam. It has to do with man. It has to do with all the different parts of man. That's the reason why there are so many different parts, so many different details to the tefillin, because each detail is necessary for perfecting the corresponding part of man, which is fascinating. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's do one more paragraph, which will finish off the mitzvah of tefillin. We were commanded to crown ourselves with this crown every single day, except for those days which are sanctified days, because those days are in of themselves a sign for the Jewish people. And on those days, the Jewish people are crowned without any additional crown. Every other day, we are not able to achieve this crowning without this action of the tefillin. Even after this ishtadlus, even with this ishtadlus of the tefillin, the level of this crowning that is achieved is not the same as those holy days. It's much less than it. So that's interesting. That's not something that I knew, not something I think I could have known. It makes me wonder how the Ramchal knows this. But the Ramchal is suggesting that not only are the holy days on which we do not wear tefillin, days where tefillin is not necessary because the day itself acts as a sign and acts as a crown, but it's much greater. It's a much greater source of kedusha and a source of connection than even the tefillin. However, or indeed, all of these things are with very specific boundaries, very specifically measured according to Hashem's divine wisdom, according to what is most appropriate. So that is, you know what, let's do one more bit, one last drop. But this is something that the Ramchal keeps on bringing up again and again, which is the idea that all these differences that we find in the mitzvahs and all these intricacies, and all of it is very, very specifically measured, very calculated. Everything, every aspect of spirituality is very carefully calculated by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, the fact that the tefillin provides only a certain level of kedusha, and the holy days provide an even higher level and an even higher degree of being crowned, that should not bother you. That shouldn't make you ask, well, what do you mean? Shouldn't it all be the same? No. Hashem has a plan. Hashem has a reason. and everything is being very, very carefully measured. Okay, paragraph 9, Tess, we'll end off with this. After he is donned in his uniform of the tzitzis and crowned with his tefillin, then he's ready to daven. Then the seder of the tefillah, the order of tefillah has been prepared. The general intention is that it gives standing to the entire creation. Kol ha'olamos, all of the world, b'matzav haroy, l'shiyushpa bam hashefa elyon, to be set up in such a way that that divine energy, that spiritual energy, should be brought down, and to draw down that shefa from before Hashem to exactly the degree that is needed. And then this is where the Ramchal will now return to the concept of tefillah and get into detail, break down the tefillah into all of its different parts and explain all of its different parts. And we will pause here for tonight and pick up here next week. Yeshua Koyach, thank you everyone for joining. I hope this